Welcome to All Sorts Podcast, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the stuff that matters, Today, we're focusing on a tragic event, really, from Christmas Day, a plane crash in Kazakhstan.
Wow.
Yeah. We're going to try to figure this whole thing out using reports from, the usual suspects, Euronews, Sky News, BBC, and CBS News.
It's going to be interesting trying to piece it all together, because we have all this information, but it's like there's still these gaps, these inconsistencies.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it just shows you how hard it is to get the full picture right when something like this happens.
Right. Okay, so let's lay it all out.
Yeah.
Azerbaijan Airlines flight J28243.
Okay.
Embraer 190. It was going from Baku, Azerbaijan to Grozny, Russia.
Mm-hmm.
But then it crashed near Aktau, Kazakhstan. 67 people on board, passengers and crew,
Oh, wow.
and from all over to Azerbaijan, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan.
It really hits you when you see that, like how many different people were on that plane. It just shows how connected we all are. Like a tragedy in one place, it can affect people all over the world.
It's true. Now, about the crash itself, people who saw it and the early reports, they all say the plane was coming down super steep.
Really?
Like almost straight down.
Yeah.
And there's even phone footage, people caught the moment it hit, the impact and the fire.
It's crazy how fast that stuff spreads online now.
I know, right? It's the world we live in now. But there's some good news. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Early reports were saying there could be anywhere from 28 to 32 survivors
Wow.
out of 67.
That's something at least.
Yeah. We're still waiting on confirmation on those numbers, but still, to survive a crash like that is
Incredible.
incredible. It really shows you what humans can handle.
And how important it is for those rescue teams to get there fast.
Yeah, right.
Thank goodness the Kazakhstani authorities were on it. They got over 50 rescuers out there and all the equipment they needed right away.
Yeah. So we know the plane went down, but we still don't really know why. At first, they were saying the flight got diverted to Aktau because Grozny was super foggy.
Oh, right.
But then some sources started talking about maybe a bird strike.
A bird strike.
Yeah.
During takeoff or landing, those can be bad news.
Yeah.
Messing up the engines or the controls. The investigators, they're going to be combing over that wreckage looking for any sign of that.
For sure. But then, on top of that, FlightRadar24.com, the flight tracking site,
Yeah.
they're saying there was strong GPS jamming messing with the plane's data right before it crashed.
Much like...
Yeah. And, this isn't the first time something like this has happened in that area.
Right.
Some people have pointed the finger at Russia before for stuff like this. So it makes you wonder if this was intentional.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot.
If the GPS was being jammed, that could have thrown the pilots way off.
Absolutely.
Especially during an emergency landing. Like, imagine trying to land a plane when your GPS is going haywire. Oh, my gosh.
And then, to make things even weirder, Flight Radar 24, their data shows the plane was doing all these crazy movements right before the crash.
What do you mean?
Like, almost like it was making figure eights in the sky.
No way.
Yeah. It's like your car's GPS suddenly sending you in circles, except, with a plane. It really makes you think something was seriously wrong.
Yeah.
Either with the plane itself or the information the pilots were getting.
It's like a mystery,
This is where the investigations are going to be super important.
Oh, yeah.
Figuring out what really happened.
And the good news is, both Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, they've both launched their own investigations to find out what caused the crash.
Okay, good.
And Embraer, the company that made the plane,
Yeah.
they've said they're ready to help out too.
That's good. They're the experts on the plane itself.
Exactly.
They can tell the investigators all about the design, the maintenance, any problems with that type of plane.
They're a vital part of this whole thing. So yeah, all that information should hopefully help paint a clearer picture,
Yeah.
of what happened.
So we got all these investigations going on, but there's so much out there right now.
Oh, yeah.
The bird strike, the GPS thing, even the number of survivors.
Yeah.
It's like nobody's on the same page.
Right.
What are people supposed to believe?
It's tough, It's natural to want answers right away when something like this happens.
Totally.
But it's really important to just be patient and stick to, sources you can trust.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up in all the speculation and rumors you see flying around. Let the investigators do their thing, and we'll get the real story eventually.
So true. And it's important to remember, this isn't just some news story. These are real people.
Absolutely.
This crash changed their lives forever.
And there's some incredible stories coming out of this too,
Yeah.
Like the people who survived, they're facing a long road to recovery, but still, It's amazing they made it out.
It's inspiring, you know.
And the first responders, talk about brave. Rushing into that wreckage, pulling people out, helping however they can.
It's amazing what people do in those moments.
And the families, the friends. I mean, they're dealing with so much right now, it's hard to even imagine.
They can't even imagine.
It's a reminder that even with all the technology and stuff we have today, you know, at the end of the day, it's people who are affected by this.
It's true. So we talked about the bird strike and the GPS jamming, but what else are they going to be looking at? I mean, when they investigate a crash like this, what all goes into it?
Oh, they look at everything. The weather.
Oh, yeah.
What the pilots were saying to air traffic control. The plane's maintenance records, the pilots themselves. How much experience they had, what kind of training.
It's a lot. So how do they even know where to start?
Well, they start with the data, the flight recorders, that kind of thing. They look for anything that seems off.
Like?
I don't know, maybe the flight recorder shows the plane suddenly lost altitude or something went wrong with the controls. If they see something like that, they know that's where they need to focus.
So it's like putting a puzzle together.
Exactly.
Using all the clues to figure out what happened.
Right. And sometimes, you know, it's not just one thing.
Oh, yeah,
it could be a whole chain of events, a bunch of little things that added up to cause the crash. Figuring that out is super important, you know?
Yeah.
So we can stop it from happening again.
Right. So you were saying earlier how we got to be careful about what we read, you know, make sure it's coming from a good source.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's so much stuff out there online.
I know.
How can we be sure we're getting the right information?
I'd say stick to the big news organizations, the ones that have a good reputation for being accurate. Don't just click on any crazy headline you see, especially on social media.
Yeah.
Look for stuff that has sources, you know, actual evidence, and don't just read one thing. See what different sources are saying.
That's good advice for, you know, anything really.
It is. You got to think critically. Don't just believe everything you see.
It's easy to get caught up in all that, you know, especially with how fast news travels these days.
It really is.
But even with all the facts and the investigation and all that, you know, we can't forget about the human side of this.
Right.
People died. People got hurt. Families are grieving. That's the real tragedy here.
Absolutely. No matter what the investigation finds, that part of the story is what matters most. You can't just ignore that.
No, you can't. It's easy to forget sometimes, you know. We talk about the data, the statistics, but these are real people.
They are. And it's important to remember that, to approach this whole thing with empathy, not just curiosity.
That's a good point. So you mentioned earlier that we can learn from tragedies like this, you know, to try to prevent them from happening again. What kind of lessons do you think we can take away from this crash?
Well, for one, it shows how important all those safety protocols are. You know, in aviation, it's such a complex system. So many things have to go right to make sure a plane takes off and lands safely. And this crash, it reminds us that we can't take any of that for granted.
It also makes you think about those systems we rely on, like GPS.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if someone can jam the signal, that's a big deal.
Huge. It raises a lot of questions about cybersecurity, you know? How do we protect these critical systems? What happens if they fail? It might be time to start thinking about backups, just in case.
That's interesting.
And on a more personal level, I think this crash reminds us how fragile life really is.
Yeah.
How important it is to cherish the people we love, to tell them how much they mean to us. Because you never know what tomorrow might bring.
That's a good point. We should never take that for granted.
We shouldn't.
So, you know, we're talking about all these lessons, but at the end of the day, this was a really awful thing that happened.
Yeah.
You know, even if we find out exactly what caused the crash, it doesn't change the fact that people lost their lives.
It doesn't. And it's important to remember that even as we're trying to understand what happened, you know, the technical stuff, the investigation, there's a human side to this. There's the grief, the pain, the loss. And that's not something you can just explain away.
It's true. It's easy to get caught up in all the details, you know, but we can't forget about the people at the heart of this.
Exactly. We need to approach this whole thing with both our heads and our hearts, you know, trying to understand what happened, but also recognizing the human cost.
You said it perfectly. So I want to circle back to something you said earlier about learning from these tragedies, you know, to prevent future ones. What kind of bigger lessons do you think will come out of this crash beyond the specifics of, you know, what caused it?
Well, I think it highlights how important it is to have strong safety protocols in aviation.
Right.
It's such a complex industry. So many things can go wrong. And this crash, it just shows how important it is to be constantly vigilant, to have rigorous training, to have international cooperation. We can't afford to let our guard down.
It also makes you think about, The vulnerability of these systems we rely on so much, like GPS.
Yeah, if someone can just jam that signal like that.
It's scary.
It is, and it raises some serious questions about cybersecurity, How do we protect these systems that are so critical to our infrastructure? Maybe we need to start thinking about backup systems, just in case.
That's a good point. I never really thought about that before.
And on a more personal level, I think this tragedy just reminds us how fragile life is, How important it is to cherish our loved ones, to tell them how much we care.
Because you never know what tomorrow will bring.
You really don't.
Well, this has been a tough one.
Yeah.
Talking about this crash, it's been hard. But I think it's important.
Me too.
We need to learn from these events. We need to understand what happened so we can prevent it from happening again. And we need to remember the people who were affected. So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on All Sorts Podcasts as we tried to make sense of this tragedy. We encourage you to stay informed, to keep asking questions, and to share your thoughts with us. And if you're looking for more deep dives into the topics that matter, be sure to subscribe to All Sorts Podcasts on YouTube and follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads. We've got tons of episodes waiting for you. Thanks for listening.